Hi, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. Glad to be back with you tonight. Continuing to read in our story, Farmer Boy by Laura Ingalls Wilder. We're on chapter 14 and it's titled Sheep Shearing. Now if you look there, that's a big pile of wool. And this right here, I think I'm pointing at it. Let me see, right there. Those are shears. They're kind of like giant scissors. Now, the meadows and pastures were velvety with green, thick grass, and the weather was warm. It was time to shear sheep. On a sunny morning, Pierre and Louise went with Alonzo into the pasture, and they drove the sheep down to the washing pens. The long pen ran from the grassy pasture into the clear, deep water of Trout River. It had two gates opening into the pasture, and between the gates, a short fence ran along the water's edge. Pierre and Louise kept the flock from running away, while Alonzo took hold of a woolly sheep and pushed it through one gate. In the pen, Father and Lazy John caught hold of it. Then Alonzo pushed another one through, and Royal and French Joe caught it. The other sheep stared and bleated. Ah! Oh, not really like that. Ah! Ah! And the two sheep struggled and kicked and yelled, but the men rubbed their wool full of soft brown soap and dragged them into the deep water. There the sheep had to swim. The men stood waist deep in the swift water and held onto the sheep and scrubbed them well. All the dirt came out of their wool and floated downstream with the soapy suds. When the other sheep saw this, every one of them cried out, "Bah! Bah!" and they all tried to run away. But Alonzo and Pierre and Louise ran yelling around the flock and brought it back to the gate again. As soon as the sheep was clean, the men made it swim around to the end of the dividing fence, and they boosted it up on the bank onto the other side of the pen. The poor sheep came out bleeping and dripping wet, but the sun soon dried it fluffy and white. As fast as the men let go of one sheep, Alonzo pushed another into the pen, and they caught it and soaked it and dragged it into the river. Washing sheep was fun for everybody except for the sheep. The men splashed and shouted and laughed in the water, and the boys ran and shouted in the pasture. The sun was warm on their backs, and the grass was cool on their bare feet. And all their laughter was small in the wide, pleasant stillness of the green fields and the meadows. One sheep butted John. He sat down in the river, and the water went over his head. Joe shouted, "Now, if you had soap in your wool, John, you'd be ready for shearing." When evening came, all the sheep were washed. Clean and fluffy white, they scattered up the slope, nibbling the grass, and the pasture looked like a snowball bush in bloom. Next morning, John came before breakfast, and Father hurried Alonzo from the table. He took a wedge of apple pie and went out to the pasture. Smelling the clover and eating the spicy apples of flaky crust in big mouthfuls, he licked his fingers. And then he rounded up the sheep and drove them across the dewy grass into the sheepfold on the south barn. Father had cleaned the sheepfold and built a platform across one end of it. He and Lazy John each caught a sheep, set it up on the platform, and began cutting off its wool with long shears. The thick white mat of wool peeled back all in one piece, and the sheep was left in bare pink skin. With the last snick of the shears, the whole fleece fell on the platform, and the naked sheep jumped off it, yelling, "Ah!" All the other sheep yelled back at the sight, but already Father and John were shearing 2 more. Royal rolled the fleece tightly and tied it with twine, that's string, and Almanzo carried it upstairs and laid it on the loft floor. He ran upstairs and downstairs as fast as he could, but another fleece was always ready for him. Father and Lazy John were good sheep shearers. Their long shears snipped through the thick wool like lightning. They cut close to the sheep, but never cut its pink skin. This was a hard thing to do because Father's sheep were prize merendos. Merendos have the finest wool, but their skin lies in deep wrinkles, and it's hard to get all the wool without cutting them. Almanzo was working fast, running upstairs with the fleeces. They were so heavy that he could only carry one at a time. He didn't mean to idle, but when he saw the tabby barn cat hurrying past with a mouse, he knew she was taking it to her new kittens. He ran after her, and far up under the eaves of the big barn he found the little nest in the hay with 4 kittens in it. The tabby curled herself around them, loudly purring, and the black slits in her eyes widened and narrowed and widened again. The kittens' tiny pink mouths uttered tiny meows, their naked little paws and wee white claws, and their eyes were shut. When Almanzo came back to the sheepfold, 6 fleeces were waiting, and Father spoke to him sternly. "Son," he said, "see to it that you keep up with us." And there they were all working. Look at them. And there goes Almanzo with a fleece up the stairs. "Yes, Father," Almanzo answered, hurrying, but he heard Lazy John say, "He can't do it. We'll be through before he is." Then Father laughed and said, "That's so, John. He can't keep up with us." Almanzo made up his mind that he'd show them. He hurried fast enough. If he hurried fast enough, he could keep up. Before noon, he'd caught up with Royal and had to wait for a fleece while it was tied. So he said, "You see, I can keep up with you." "Oh, no, you can't," said John. "We'll beat you. We'll be through before you are. Wait and see." They were laughing when they heard the dinner horn. Father and John finished the sheep they were shearing, and they went to the house. Royal tied the last fleece and left it, and Almanzo still had to carry it upstairs. Now he understood what they meant, but he thought, "I won't let them beat me." He found a short rope and tied it around the neck of a sheep that wasn't sheared. He led the sheep up to the stairs, and then step by step he tugged and boosted her upward. She bleated all the way, but he got her into the loft. He tied her near the fleeces and gave her some hay to keep her quiet. Then he went down to dinner. All that afternoon, Lazy John and Royal kept telling him to hurry or they'd beat him. Almanzo answered, "No, you won't. I'll keep up with you." Then they laughed at him. He snatched up every fleece as soon as Royal tied it and hurried it upstairs and laid it down, and then he ran down again. They laughed to see him hurrying, and they kept saying, "Oh no, you won't beat us. We'll be through first." Just before chore time, Father and John raced to shear the last 2 sheep. father beat. Almanzo ran with the fleece, and he was back before the last one was ready. Royal tied it, and then he said, "We're all through, Almanzo. We beat you. We beat you." Royal and John burst into a great roar of laughter, and even father laughed. Then Almanzo said, "No, you haven't beat me. I've got a fleece upstairs that you haven't sheared yet." They stopped laughing, surprised. At that very minute, the sheep in the loft, hearing all the other sheep let out to pasture, cried, "Baa!" Almanzo shouted, "There's the fleece. I've got it upstairs, and you haven't sheared it. I beat you. I beat you." John and Royal looked so funny that he couldn't stop laughing. Father roared with laughter. "Joke's on you, John," father shouted. "He laughs best who laughs last." Well, that was quite a trick. And it sounds like it was a really fun day. I used to have sheep, and we would shear them. And that was kind of hard work. And one time, to try to hold the sheep still, I stepped over it like I was riding it like a horse. And guess what? I almost got knocked off it. So that was the last time I did that. Well, I hope you liked today's chapter. It was pretty fun, I think. And I'll be reading to you tomorrow. So I want to pray blessings on you and yours, in your house and out of your house, the day and the night. Whatever you do, keep dreaming. Keep a story in your heart. Talk to you tomorrow.